thought they had banished us forever. But now, finally, we have returned.
And indeed we have. Welcome to another Writer's Showcase, everybody. I'm pleased to say that this is going to be a fun one. I'm excited to read Mothmaster's story, and I'm excited for Tarek and Count Balerion to read their stuff. Just a little bit of housekeeping in terms of what the thing is going to be. At least for my reading, y'all voted a while back, and the second thing was a vision quest. So that's going to be what I'll read today. I'll probably only read half of it this week, half of it next week, since it's a little bit long. We only have a few people on the stream today, but maybe I'll read a good amount of it. So we'll see. I'll pause partway through, and if y'all are interested, I'll keep going. But speaking of interesting and fascinating topics, please allow me to welcome my guests. First off, Tarek.
我が力、我が刃、我が狂気、我が狂気をもて見解せよ。エクスはーうがせエクスプロージョン。
Oh shit, I get top billing this week. Fuck.
Indeed.
Just ask, am I coming in okay? I have my microphone positioned somewhere differently this time.
You sound perfectly fine.
All right, good.
And of course, our resident Balerion curmudgeon.
Afternoon, minions.
Yeah.
She wounds me so.
Yeah. Though I have to ask now.
I think you've got to start wondering, what the hell is this plot?
Yes.
Yeah. They'll probably come in useful at points where we're confused as to what's going to happen. Alrighty. So I think what we'll do is I'll just read Moth's first, then Tarek can read his, then Count Balerion will read his, and then I'll read my own thing. Sound like a good plan?
Sounds good to me.
Should be fine as long as I get on before 4-ish.
Oh, that's not going to be a problem. We're probably going to hopefully be done by 1, under, not 1, 2:30 MST-ish.
Yeah, that's be early then.
Yeah. You're not stabbing him, you're bullying him. Get it right. Alrighty. So, this is the preface. I can also share this. I can also share it since this is an actual good thing. So, the preface is, after the water beast was defeated, Northwater meets a young moth named Atolo aboard the first captain's naval ship. He told Lady Northwater his story, as he knows a bit about the giants. The whole conversation is interrupted when a hippogriff attacks the ship and Sarin is blinded. Northwater faces a terrible but necessary decision. "Forgive me, sir." With a quick action, the sound of a felled animal echoed across the frozen sea, the waves swallowing a severed head and a grizzled and aged body. Lord Hallinger was on the frigate beside Northwater's ship as he turned away, his expression clearly showing regret. It was the sort of regret that was destined to happen, but nothing could have been done to stop it. Hallinger watched Sarin's corpse float underneath the city, ICC, and he banged his fist against his breastplate in mourning. The sound of a hippogriff's cry sounded through in the mists, and Northwater readied herself for an attack. A large white blur with black tips swooped down near the large sails, and a pair of shiny obsidian talons slammed into the deck. It was a snow bunting, a small yet fast hippogriff with an orange beak and gray flecks like ashfall on its back. She noticed that one of its left talons was severed. The Astatin and looked at Iran's blade, which he dropped out beside the corpse of a fallen soldier, and she snatched it. "I am not going down without a fight," huffed Northwater as her legs spread and her wings flattened against her back. An ear-piercing scream came from the lower deck, and the captain's head shot out of the doorway in confusion and annoyance. What was it now? Atolo rushed out of the bunkers, his brown fur now covered in dragon leather armor. It was rather fitting for him, as it shared the earthy tones as the rest of them. And then, with silver rivets dotting around his upper arms, his chest was covered in snow-white griffin feathers, although some had ash-gray tips. Those same pale tan gloves were upon his hands, and his legs guarded by steel cuisses and tall dragon leather sabatons that had fur wrapped around his knees. His shins were covered in thin gray tail feathers, but they were wrapped with served as warm greaves. His small wings were flattened, his dark brass helm was still there upon his tiny head, and his eyes had shone on something within him that made Northwater shiver. In the second he came by, she noticed that Umian had nothing but vengeance on his mind, a hatred not just for the beast that had invaded their ship, but something deeper. She began to think for a moment. The boy saw so many things that shook him, yet here he was, still standing. He came from the kingdom of man, yet here there was a hatred of everything that burned deeper within him. It burned hotter than any holy fire. She realized then it was something unmatched by any moth, nay, any being that dared walk this earth. And that scream, that cry, Northwater could still hear it in her head like a ringing bell. That was no war cry. It was no mere vengeance or justice. It was hatred incarnate. "Atolo, no!" Lord Hallinger's voice snapped the captain back to reality. The boy's hands gripped not one but two axes, with steel blades sharp as a lion's fang, and thick ashen wood that barely stood within his fingers. He leapt up at the beast, and the hippogriff screeched as the axes clutched deep into its flesh. Northwater could only hear the noise of the young moth screaming in rage, and saw his body being tossed around madly as the bird flapped its wings and spun in a torrent of agony. The captain had fear racing through her. "Atolo, come back here!" she yelled, but she knew it was too late. He was being consumed by fury, and no call could sway him, for all he wanted to listen for was that beast's death howl. The Hastatan noticed that he had done nothing else except pierce the bird's chest. He had done nothing more. He could not drag those blades, nor remove them, for they were too heavy and he was too weak. The hippogriff screamed and twisted in the air, throwing him high. The sun cast a deep shadow over the water, one of a horrified boy that came to the realization that he was about to die. The obsidian talons closed in upon him, and he let out a choke as the leather squeezed his body. "Atolo!" Northwater nearly wanted to rip her own antenna off as she saw him gasping for air. She then noticed that the talons did not go into his flesh. "What the?" she began to say, but she was interrupted by the beast flying to the west and away from the fleet. "Stop that beast!" ordered the captain, though she knew it was not an order that she could carry out. No one could. The bird took him. Northwater's eyes widened greatly as he could barely see the back of the snow bunting's unsevered leg in the mast. A thin ring of a deep green metal was tied to its ankle, and the shade of green was unlike any of the forests of her homeland. Upon it there was a sigil of a soaring fangs piercing a scale. That was not a wild snow bunting. The word Skull Empire had sent the bastard. Northwater collapsed to her knees and fell silent. She didn't even hear Lord Hollinger come up from the other boat and sat down beside her. She didn't feel his hand touch her thigh and his fingers nudge hers. She didn't listen to his whisper, "We're going to get him back. Don't worry." She didn't want to hear him. All she wanted was for that boy to return. And that's the end.
I hear an alarm going off. I apologize. That is just distracting.
Yeah, sorry. It's my alarm for 12:55. I apologize.
It's all right. Otherwise, though, well done, Moth. Very well done.
Is that what that was?
Yes.
Yes, very good. They do seem kind of anthropomorphic, the moths.
Oh, for some reason, it may just be because I've been playing way too much Assassin's Creed 2, but I don't know. Like, I kind of want to see these moths, and especially with some of the descriptions we got here today, I kind of want to see them in a religious setting. Like, what would a moth church look like? Like, what kind of robes would they wear? I think that's actually would be really interesting.
Oh, it would be. That would be fascinating. You know, insight to their culture and stuff like that. That would be interesting.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of just reminds me, like, the robe comment. It's that stringy thingy. We've been over this. It's a harp, and you know it. Yeah, that's a harp, and that's a dress. Robe.
But yeah, I kind of I don't know why, but for some reason now I kind of want to see what these moths, like what kind of church these moths would have. Like, be interesting to see.
I concur with that.
All right.
I believe it is your turn, my Bardley friend.
Alrighty, so just a refresher for where we left off last time. Last time we were here, Aviana and Merrick had went to the Scattered Star for lunch. Merrick is leaving to join the Guardians as a new recruit. So this was kind of their just their last meal together before he leaves. He pours his heart out to her, saying that he doesn't even want to imagine coming back home and she's not there, and that she should suck up her pride and find a job as a servant. And Aviana, responding as only Aviana as she would, says, I love you like a brother. You're very special to me. I am honored that you consider me part of your family, but I can't do that. I can't live my life knowing that I have nowhere to go, and this is my only direction. So that leads us to where we are today. Okay. It wasn't long after they finished their meal that Aviana and Merrick left the tavern. As they exited, Merrick mentioned that he had a few errands that he needed to complete before this evening. He suggested to Aviana that she should spend that time looking for work. Merrick said that he would meet her back at the storehouse at sundown so they could walk to the recruiters together. Given that the sun was hanging overhead, Aviana estimated it was just past noon, and that she had enough time to go meet with the Chancellor. After asking a guardian for directions, she arrived at the Chancellor's home and noticed that the house was somewhat mundane. Most of the time, nobles, even the lesser ones who lived in the trade district, would have at least something fanciful about their residence, items like marble pillars, a statue, or a balcony looking out into the street. Instead, it had the same wooden and stone structure as every other house on the street, and the roof was the same green colors as all the others. The only difference between the Chancellor's house and all the other homes was that instead of being 2 floors, it was 3, and thus rose above the others. And there was also a bronze plaque on the wall near the door that she assumed read Chancellor's office. She balled her hand into a fist and gently rapped her knuckles against the door. She waited for a few moments before the door opened, revealing a man standing behind it. He was a bald, older-looking man of average height and with a bit of weight in his midsection. However, despite his age, his posture was strong, and he stood up straight and firm. His face had lines running down his eyes, and she assumed his cheeks, but wasn't able to confirm since a gray beard covered them and his chin. The most distinctive feature about his face was his eyes. They were a dark blue, but looked strong and focused. He wore a dark yellow shirt that covered his arms, with gray pants and a black leather belt around his waist, along with black boots, the typical clothing for a retainer to a noble. "Yes?" the man said, his voice somewhat gravelly and deep, looking down at her. "I'm sorry to disturb you, sir. I'm here to see the Chancellor about a matter," Aviana replied, shrinking down a little, intimidated by the man's stare. "Regarding?" Aviana opened her mouth to reply, but stopped, thinking about what she wanted to say carefully. I think I have information to help catch the man who broke into his house the other night. She said she was starting to sweat a little. It felt as like the man's eyes were observing her, as though they were looking for something. "Very well, come with me," the man replied, opening the door wider, allowing her to step inside. When she walked into the house, she was greeted with the sight of a simple red rug running from the entrance to a closed mahogany-colored door. To the right of her was a wooden staircase with a handrail running up to the second floor, and to her right was a closed, dark-colored door. She followed right behind the man to the end of the hallway, where he stopped and took out a key from his front pocket. He fumbled with the lock before it opened and clicked. It clicked and opened. He then opened the door, revealing a well-sized room with a mahogany desk in the center. On the desk sat piles of both paper and parchment, littered all over it, and covered in beautiful handwriting. Behind the desk sat a very comfortable dark brown chair with a red cushion, with backrests and a curved armrests. Built into the back wall was a large rectangular window, revealing a sizable back lot beyond the warped glass. Aviana looked up as she stepped in and saw hanging above the window was a saber with a silver handle and hanging on 2 hooks. The steel blade was polished and reflected the room around her as well as her face. In front of the desk sat a simpler yet light yellow chair, similar to the ones commonly seen in most taverns. On the right of the room were large bookcases filled to the brim with tomes that had bright yellow covers. On the left, there was a back counter full of bottles in what she assumed to be wine, as well as a copper serving tray with bronze goblets sitting on them. The oddest thing Aviana found in the room was what looked to be old bed sheets piled up next to the desk. They were dirty and looked as though someone had been lying in them. The man walked behind the desk and sat in the cushioned seat. He then folded his hands and leaned forward, both of them resting on his chin. "What can I do for you?" the man asked, staring into her eyes. Aviana felt like such a fool. Tarek and McHale might not have minded, but most nobles did not appreciate not being shown the proper respect. She took a nervous breath and steeled herself before exhaling. "Please, excuse my lack of manners, sir. My name is Aviana," she said, bowing her head and chest, continuing to look into his face. She noticed that the Chancellor raised an eyebrow at her name, but quickly lowered it. "I am Marcel Wayne, Chancellor of Tyrann. Now tell me what you have discovered," the Chancellor said, putting his fingers together in a triangle shape and leaning into the backrest of his chair. Aviana told the story of how she chased the shadowy man and how he nearly escaped by hiding in the shadows of the building before he got away. She then told him about the second figure who appeared and threw a coin at her. The Chancellor listened to every word, his face unmoving, as though he was contemplating something. "I see. And do you have this coin you claim he threw at you?" the Chancellor asked. Aviana took the silver coin from her cloak pocket and placed it onto the desk, with the bird side face up. The Chancellor picked up the coin and twisted it around in his fingers, observing it. You haven't shown this to anyone, have you? The Chancellor asked. No, sir. I'm sorry. Aviana began, when suddenly the Chancellor raised his hand up. Good. Now tell me, why was this Yvette admitted into the college grounds? The Chancellor asked, his fingers casually toying with the coin. How did you know I was? Aviana began, when suddenly she was interrupted. It is my job to know what's going on in my city. So the sight of a peasant girl walking into one of the most hallowed institutions of the country is going to attract attention. Now, given that you are wearing dirty clothing and are Yvette, it is obvious you weren't there to undergo tutelage. So tell me, what were you doing there? The revelation unsettled Aviana. For her entire life, she had always assumed that no one was paying attention to her. I was only there to deliver a letter, sir. I met a skald at an inn near the docks, and he tasked me with delivering it to his brother. What were the name of this skald and mage? The Chancellor asked. The skald's name was Tarek Pranka, and his brother's name was Mikhail Pranka, Aviana answered. The sons of attendant Pranka. Intriguing, the Chancellor said, scratching his gray beard. Was there anything discussed between you and the mages? Anything that sounded important? Aviana shook her head, looking down at her feet. No, sir. The Chancellor nodded and looked down at a few sheets of paper on his desk before looking up again. Did Mikhail ask you any questions? All Mikhail wanted to know was what his brother was doing, Aviana said, but paused as she began to run through the conversation in her head. I don't know if this is important, but he also asked if Tarek mentioned anything about Melrin to me. The Chancellor raised his eyebrow at the village's name before lowering it. Did Tarek mention anything about Melrin? The Chancellor asked. No, he didn't, Aviana answered firmly. Very well. Did Mikhail ask you anything further? The Chancellor pressed. Only why I was chosen to give the letter to him, Aviana answered. A valid question. Why were you sent? The Chancellor followed up. I don't know the true reason, sir, Aviana said quietly, her voice trembling as she recalled the encounter with the Archmage and his theory on why she was sent. The true reason? The Chancellor inquired. Tarek told me while I was there I might learn something. He also offered me a bag of Dharma to do it, Aviana answered. And did you learn anything while you were there? The Chancellor asked. Aviana sat silently for a moment. She wanted to say she learned that the Archmage was a very scary man. All I learned is I'm not meant to be a mage, she answered sadly. I see, the Chancellor said, his voice full of sympathy. He then took a black feathered quill from the inkwell on his desk and began to write several sentences on a blank piece of parchment. Thank you. You have been far more helpful than I thought you'd be, the Chancellor said, sounding genuinely grateful. I'm sorry, sir. I don't understand. How was any of that helpful? I knew even less when I exited the college than when I entered, Aviana asked, trying to wrap her head around the Chancellor's thinking. Chancellor folded his hands, his face becoming stern, but remained sophisticated and focused. When we started, I had no information about the goings-on inside the college. Thanks to you, I now know they are a little more than concerned about what's happening in Melrin, which means they have a vested interest in the area. But I heard that mages were already in Melrin, along with many other tradesmen. Isn't it their job to go to destroyed towns and look for mages that may have died in them? Aviana asked. Very astute, yes. That is part of their responsibility. However, it's common knowledge that that particular responsibility is seen more as a punishment than a task of any significant importance, the Chancellor answered, placing his quill back into the inkwell. I didn't know that, Aviana said bluntly. The Chancellor smirked. No, I suppose you wouldn't. Allow me to rephrase. It's common knowledge amongst nobles who actively have to associate with the Mages' College. I'm sorry, sir, but what does any of this have to do with the break-in? Aviana questioned, wondering how the conversation got so far off topic. Do not concern yourself with that. I am having that matter handled personally, the Chancellor replied, his tone turning far more ominous. Aviana shuddered as she remembered the conversation between the mercenaries from the night before. Though once the shuddering had passed, she was only left with the confusion that began to eat away at her. Sir, please, I am so confused. Why would you talk to me if you already handling this? What is the purpose of the coin? Who are these people I saw last night? Aviana asked, frustrated as she tried to link the pieces together. Suddenly, a smirk formed on the Chancellor's face. You're very inquisitive for a civet. The Chancellor went silent for a moment, and he looked up into the ceiling as though he was thinking about something important. Tell me, do you have a job? It was Aviana's turn to go silent. She blinked, unsure if she just heard the Chancellor correctly. I'm sorry? She's asked. Do you have a job? The Chancellor asked again. No, sir, but I have been looking for one. Aviana answered. Do you have anyone taking care of you? The Chancellor followed up. Aviana was about to answer when she shut her mouth and thought about the question and nodded. I do, sir. My friend Merrick, but he was recruited by the Guardians last night. He's leaving for Karen to begin his training this evening. The Chancellor bent down, and Aviana heard what sounded like a drawer opening. And when he sat up, he was holding a fist-sized bag. The bag was filled to the brim and had the unmistakable sound of jingling Dharma inside it. Since you came all this way, I'm willing to make a deal with you. Now, either I could give you 200 Dharma right now, and you give me the coin. Or you can keep the coin, and I'll give you a job. Aviana stared at the stuffed bag and felt herself tremble with excitement. That much Dharma would allow her to purchase her own home, and then maybe she could use Merrick's advice and find work under a lord just to keep herself fed. The more she thought about it, though, the more the excitement faded. The Archmage's words echoed through in her head again, causing her to grimace in disgust at the thought. What kind of job is it? Aviana asked. Why does it matter why does it matter? Most people would be on their hands and knees begging for a job with me, the Chancellor said quietly. Aviana looked down at the floor. I promised myself that I wouldn't live my life in servitude, that I wouldn't let being a civet determine my fate. I need to be sure it's not the kind of job where I'm just cleaning floors in stables because I have no other choice, Aviana said, stuttering. A civet with pride, aren't you peculiar? I can't give you the details of the job here, but I promise you will not be living your life at the behest of a lord. Now, that's not to say there will not be times when you will be expected to clean floors in stables, the Chancellor said firmly. Aviana went silent, thinking about the offer that had just been placed before her. On the one hand, he did assure her that she wouldn't just be a maid or a servant. On the other hand, she had no idea what the job he possibly had in mind, but he was offering something which is more than most ever did. I'll take the job, Aviana said, finally looking into his eyes. It nearly broke her heart as she watched the Chancellor take the bag of gold and put it into the desk drawer again. He then placed the silver coin on the desk. Aviana reached over to pick up the coin when suddenly she felt the Chancellor's hand grab hers and squeeze it. When she looked up, she realized she was face to face with the Chancellor. Are you sure? This job won't be easy, I can promise you. Once you accept, there's absolutely no going back. I don't have any other choice, sir. Aviana started. And she began choking on her words. And the Chancellor asked, I think my friend will be able to leave in peace, knowing I have employment with someone reputable, Aviana finished. Very well. I want you to come to an establishment known as the Dove's Branch tomorrow night. It's on the north side of the district, the Chancellor said, letting go of her hand. Aviana placed the coin in her cloak pocket before sitting up straight in her chair again. The establishment will have a sign with a dove with a branch in its mouth. Show the coin to the doorman when you get there, and he will let you in. We will discuss the terms of your employment there. However, before tomorrow night, I want you to go to the bazaar and find a man named Florin Vaucoup. He is my tailor, and he will make sure you are outfitted appropriately for tomorrow night, the Chancellor ordered. Aviana's heart raced in excitement. She couldn't wait to tell Merrick what had just happened. However, the feeling didn't last long the more she thought about it. How do I know this isn't just some trick or scam? How do I know you're not just going to do away with me when I get there? She asked, nervously, her voice quaking at the thought of her dream from the night before. It wasn't wise to question nobles like this, but she could see it now, her body lying dead in a snowbank, only to be tossed aside into an unmarked grave with a bunch of other forgotten corpses. The Chancellor scoffed in amusement. In my line of work, we have a saying. The truth and knowledge dead men hold is lost forever. Aviana stared blankly at the Chancellor and cocked her head. The Chancellor chuckled. It means that when someone is dead, I have lost a potential source of information. And in my position, I can't afford to lose such sources. So I can assure you, this isn't a trap, and it's not a ruse. You are worth far more alive than dead. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. I will see you tomorrow at the Dove's Stick, the Chancellor said before lowering his head to the notes on his desk. He took his quill from the inkwell again and began writing on separate sheets of paper. Aviana got up from her chair and walked to the office door, but stopped when her hand grasped the handle. She let go and turned back towards the Chancellor. Why are you offering me this? I've been called a burden by others, and told that being a civet marks me for a life of squalor and civet, if not just servitude. I have no one to speak for me, no family to receive restitution from if something should happen. You're the Chancellor, a noble. You could have asked anybody, and they would have fallen at your feet for the chance to work for you. Why choose me? Aviana asked. The Chancellor stopped writing mid-pen stroke and placed the quill down. He looked up with an impressed smile on his face. You have good instincts. If a job seems suspicious, always ask why you're the one being chosen to do it. However, you're wrong about one thing. I could not have asked just anyone to do this job. The reason I'm asking for you to do it is because you're the most qualified candidate I have ever met to even consider making this offer, the Chancellor answered. I don't understand. What makes me extraordinary? Aviana asked, frustrated. The smile on the Chancellor's face vanished, and his expression became stern again. I never said you were extraordinary, only that you were qualified. All your concerns and questions will be answered tomorrow night, but not a moment before. Do you understand me? The Chancellor said, his voice firm and authoritative. I understand, my lord. I understand, Aviana said, trembling at the thought of the Chancellor's rumored past. Very good. Attend whatever business you have. I believe you'll want to see that friend of yours off, he said, his voice becoming much more pleasant again. Aviana nodded and bowed her head. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, Lord Wayne. I promise I will give you everything I have, just to provide whatever you need, Aviana said gratefully, her voice still shaky as she bowed. Very good. I expect nothing less, the Chancellor said before waving her off and returning to his work. Once Aviana was back on the city street, she could hear her heart racing as a wide smile decorated her face. She couldn't wait to tell Merrick the good news. She looked up to the sky and could see the sun was now slightly further west. All I need to do is meet that Florin man and the Chancellor mentioned. Then I can go meet Merrick, Aviana said to herself as she ran in the direction of the bazaar, the cold never bothering her and the smile never fading from her face. And that's it for this week.
Interesting. Okay. I do like this Chancellor guy. He's clearly exceptionally intelligent. You write him very much like he's a Sherlock Holmes type character, at least that I could see.
I'm just going to say this out right now. He's mostly inspired by my grandfather, who is very much this kind of person. If he doesn't have information, he will literally sidestep his way around it to get that information. Like literally take control of the conversation, ask obtuse questions, anything he can to get a leg up. And it's funny, he makes such a good, again, it's the characterization is based on my granddad, but it's just interesting to see this kind of character play out.
I can see that for sure.
Balerion, you there? I guess the only...
Yes. Have a moment. I had to unmute myself. Sorry.
What did you think?
I like that interview. I like the voice.
Oh, thank you.
How did she get in there again?
He literally let her in. Like, the way I figured it in this context is that she had to ask for directions to the office because, let's face it, do you know who your do you know where your city hall is at any given moment?
I'd have to Google that.
Exactly. So I had to have her ask for directions for that. But I think this part is actually more clever on my end. I like personally that she didn't know she was talking to the Chancellor, because I thought about it and I was like, if I were to walk up to the mayor of my city right now, would I even know he was the mayor?
So there weren't like guards keeping her out of the office and all that?
No, because while he is an important figure, he does need to be accessible, and we're going to learn more about the Chancellor later, like why he does the things the way he does.
Okay, so he takes a more enlightened approach, or more liberal approach.
He takes a far more... You'll find out. Like, he'll be a really interesting supporting character, I think.
Yes, he sounds like one. One small thing.
Yes.
Well-sized, wouldn't good-sized be better?
It's I guess, but I think well worked out fine, personally.
Yeah, that's one of those little picayune points that comes up.
I thought well worked out well enough.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
So, and that definitely answers Mrs. Hypatia's question.
What was her question? I didn't see it.
I believe it was. Okay, my thing is being a little bit.
Is she even? Didn't she have to go at some point? Didn't she have to? Let's see. Earth to Balerion says hoo-ha. Says brightness back up.
Oh.
The Chancellor is sus, says faceless figure.
Okay, it seems my thing is being strange right now. I don't know why it's.
I'm
Okay.
scrolling up now to see if there's a question from her.
I think it was like, wouldn't there be kind of like an quick etiquette lesson, I guess?
There was something like that, and Aviana will be a spy, she thinks, and yeah, that's also what I thought.
All right.
Yeah, she does have a question about that.
I'm trying to. I apologize that I'm not trying to take up so much time. I'm trying to find the question.
Okay, it's all right. I found it.
Okay.
A technical question. Shouldn't people being brought into the presence of aristocracy be given a quick tutorial of how to act? As autistic, I'd love that.
I thought about that too, but again, like, the way the Chancellor does things is very different. Like, the fact he's even talking to her after she said her name kind of proves that, okay, something's weird about this guy. He's letting her speak. He didn't just immediately write her off by saying, you're Savette. What the hell do I care? You probably are just lying to get money. Go get a job.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you got to remember with the way she was raised and everything, like, she never really kind of learned proper etiquette in these situations.
Yeah, and she just asks him, how do I know this isn't a trick? And he doesn't mind as much as you'd expect him to.
Right.
Oh,
oh.
Yikes. Oh no, help.
I've killed Dunn.
Oh, well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to assume emergency powers.
Fuck you.
Killer, and I'm sorry, Mr. Cherrick, but you're under arrest now.
For what?
I'll have to impose martial law.
Martial law on two people.
So should I start reading, or should I wait for him to come on?
You're the one who enacted martial law. You tell me. Okay,
there
good.
you are.
Captain, my captain, you're back. Thank Christ.
Yes, I'm so happy you're back. Unfortunately, someone tried to kill you. It's very suspicious. I think it might be Tarek might be trying to murder you. We're going to have to. I'm going to have to assume secure. I've had to place security in a high alert.
The hitman I hired sucks.
I actually have that.
Oh, you did?
The fact that the guy is alive proves that the hitman I hired sucked.
Yay. That made me so happy.
Yes.
You're welcome. What can I say except you're welcome? Yeah. I was having just weird problems with the the comments. I wasn't able to do anything, so I just had to refresh.
Yeah. A murder, attempted or otherwise.
Well, technically, Lord Captain Commander is a White Cloak title, so People need to read Wheel of Time so I can actually.
People need to read Wheel of Time so you can nerd out about it.
There's also the possibility that I just framed Tarek and it was me all along, but we're not going to get into that.
No, I don't think you're clever enough.
So essentially, Count Balerion is the little finger to Tarek's Sir Dantos Hollard.
Something like that.
Tarek will not get that one.
No, I'm lost. I'm lost.
Dantos was a drunk trap that Littlefinger used as his go-between to get Sansa out of the country. So that I think he was involved in the murder of too.
You're a White Cloak. Yeah, since White Cloaks are basically the Team Rocket of the Wheel of Time universe, but yet they have the coolest title I've ever read in a book. So,
when you said White Cloak, I thought you meant the Kingsguard.
No, White Cloaks are basically an even more institutionalized version of the Spanish Inquisition and Wheel of Time.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Alrighty. Hashtag oof. Yeah.
Okay, so you want me to read now?
Yep. Yep, I believe so.
Okay, this is from the serious one, so hopefully no trauma this time.
I'm always traumatized.
Okay, this is from Lady Margaret. So
no, I am not a Kingsguard. I used to be. Now I'm a freelancer. I own my own personal mercenary company, I guess.
Okay, are we ready for you to read now?
Yep.
Okay. Some new characters now. Muku pricked up his ears and listened. Night had fallen, and there was nothing to be heard but the waves gently striking the ship and the squawking of gulls and zoomies, those weird shorebirds with the serrated bill and the loud personality. Yet still he hesitated. He had not dared leave the ship all day. But if he was still on the ship when day broke, he was lost. So he slowly inched out of his hiding place, using starlight to guide his steps while listening to hear which side of the ship was nearest the shore. After a few minutes that felt like an eternity, he disembarked and walked out onto the pier. One of the sailors was standing guard, but fortunately was instructed to keep unauthorized people from coming on board, not from getting off. Still, if the sailor had turned his head, it would all have been over. Unless Muku could persuade him he was a member of the crew, which was doubtful. Muku, despite his disguise, was not really the nautical type. Muku darted to the right and kept going until he reached the encircling road, which surrounded Peje on all sides. He had no wish to go through Peje and hoped to get away from the city and onto the path to the Ambata, pardon me, Garawada's castle as soon as possible. Cities were dangerous. There the Grey Watch would be on the lookout. The encircling road was only modestly paved, and to the north hardly paved at all. Paving had been put aside for more pressing concerns, like increasing the sarangi, that's the concubine, supply, not to mention that masons were expensive, and peasants, well, they could... pardon me a second. Well, they could conveniently be dragooned, lacked the skill. This meant that there were already many footprints and hoofprints. It also meant that travel on the road was perilous during the day. Actually, it was dangerous at night too, because of bandits, although there were relatively few of those around Peje. Who knows, he thought. Perhaps the bandits will let me join them. It would be less hopeless than the chore Holy One has set me. Oh, I'm seeing if I can read this. Yanaisha Hanara, as they say. Choose the least bad option. As he trod the encircling road, Muku's mind went back to the day Holy One, Grand Yaji Garawad the 33rd, had charged him with the onerous task of publishing a decree against Sandaranian abuses. It was admittedly understandable that the Temple of Karat in Ichakarainaj should take a dim view of the reports of sarangis and pedophilia and nameless perversions at the Sandaranian court, which already viewed as semi-barbarous. It was particularly incensed at not having been consulted in the choice of the imperial Yaji. And by all accounts, he's a pander in priest's clothing, recalled Muku. Garawad had therefore issued a decree suspending the imperial Yaji Malala Ama until such time as he should be found innocent of the accusations levied against him, and insisting on a general cleaning up of the Sandaranian court. And the lucky one charged with bringing this decree into Sandaran was none other than the priest-jurist Muku Be Mwengura Morangi. Holy One, why should they heed me? He had asked. They were speaking, of course, in Turanian. Sandaranian was the honking of geese and the screeching of monkeys so far as Holy One was concerned. You are Sandaranian, replied the Inyaji. You should find it easier to make them understand you. You can explain in the local language the meaning of our decree, since the knowledge of the language of the truth and of civilization is not perhaps so widespread there as one would like. You are also an honored jurist and a Yaji renowned for the sobriety of your life, so your words will doubtless carry great weight among your countrymen. Holy One greatly exaggerates the respect in which my views are held in Sandaran, protested Muku. More Conlang. The Limanu Moranat. Let me say that again, sir. Limanu Moranat. Okay, that's good enough. Are distinctly out of fashion there. To put it mildly, these were one of the three principal schools of jurisprudence. The name means lovers of the poor. The school had been banned in Sandaran under the Chuggans, and the ban had never been lifted. Someone must do it, insisted the Inyaji, and we command that it be you. Muku bowed low. As Holy One commands, my only advice is to make preparations for my funeral now. It will save time later. Which is why Muku now found himself disguised as a hunter and tramping northwestward on the encircling road, carrying a satchel with some provisions and a precious yet perilous manuscript marked with a Grand Yaji's seal. It could be worse. At least I managed to persuade Holy One not to require that I publish the decree in Tena, the capital. This way I'll live a little longer. We Nayaisha Iria, be grateful for small things. When he finally reached the northernmost part of the road, now more a large path than a road, he veered off and began hiking through the forest. Here he was probably in less danger from highwaymen, but there was always the possibility of coming across lone thieves or bands of outlaws. Not that he had much worth stealing, apart from the Grand Yaji's decree itself. And wild animals lurked in the forest. Saber-toothed tigers, it was said, wolves, even glyptodonts could be dangerous if startled and could deal death with their spiky tails. Although Muku preferred even the saber-toothed tigers to the Sandoranian courtiers. Comparing the court to a pit of vipers would be indescribably rude to the latter, he observed to no one in particular. And at least death by saber-toothed tiger would probably be quick. This decree will cost me my head, if I'm lucky, he added. Pal shilawa, lawai maki tal. Law is one thing and power is another. That is why, even in Terrania, he had gone incognito, lest the Sandoranian court get wind of his errand, or at least let them not recognize me as the messenger, he had decided. To make it yet harder to track him, he had changed disguises every few days. But after traveling through the forest, he doubted his own guardian spirit would recognize him. It's a long way to Darzaz, and this isn't getting me there any quicker, he thought at length. He had decided that, if he had to publish the decree in the Sandoranian Empire, Darzaz was the least bad place to do it, since it was the farthest from court. Unfortunately, it was also the farthest from Terrania, and therefore required a rather grueling journey. Muku's mission had therefore meant a lot of nighttime travel and less than ideal lodgings. Hopefully, I can obtain lodging and provisions on the way from Counts Garawala and Pilamar, he had reasoned. They say those two are not in the best odor at court, so perhaps they'll be sympathetic enough to lend aid. He was not so sanguine as to expect them to stick out their necks for him unduly. And why should they? Their first duty is to protect their people. As Leonard Vron wrote, Agaraj Engnan Graj, to rule is to defend the weak. Their people are the weak too. Second. He took a bite from his provisions and wondered, since they were running low, whether he would turn out to be any good at hunting or fishing. Despite being disguised as a hunter, he doubted it. He made a helpless gesture. Where am I? Said his evening prayers and lay down under a magnolia tree, uncertain whether it would be a bad thing or a good thing to be caught and eaten by wild beasts, given the alternatives. He eventually fell into a fitful sleep. When he woke, it wasn't yet dawn, but he ate a meager breakfast of blue-green spinach and shiny rat meat anyway, before trudging on. Let's see, how long has it been so far? Like a quarter hour?
Roughly.
Let's see, how long is the next section? Oh, the next section's short. I'll do the next section too. I'm tired of waiting, said Ekwekwe, the emperor. I've been waiting for years for Margaret and Barama. I want them in the Barusa now, and I want their fathers killed. Now, I exulted. He was taking a break from orgies and giving Mpu'u and Malalaama a tongue lashing in the vestibule to his bedchamber. The room was filled with tasteless, if opulent, pornography. The Saranjis were doing an indecent dance that Mpu'u found distracting in the extreme. The emperor had been trying to get his counselors to write a decree in his name banning the wearing of clothes in the palace, and then moved on to commanding that a pornographic statue be erected in the throne room. Having got them, with protests on the part of the Yaji and eye-rolling on the part of the prince. To agree to the latter, he now returned to the subject of Margaret and Barama. We need a reasonable pretext before we can kill them, said Mpu'u. Peasants one can maybe kill on a whim, although that cuts down the labor supply, but not nobles. Where am I? I've explained this to Exalted 100 times. I'm not sure what Exalted sees in Margaret and Barama anyway. They look like fairly ordinary Economans to me. I don't see why Exalted doesn't just stick with the Saranjis we gave him not long ago. They looked practically the same, and their attitude was a sight better. Oh, God, no. Pardon me. I find a horrible error in here. I'm getting the names of my characters confused. Okay. Mpu'u glanced around the room and muttered, "The decor in this room is atrocious. What I wouldn't give for taste." Patience is a virtue that has often been praised, added Malala Ama nervously. Scripture says, "I don't care. I, Exalted, want them now." Exalted sputtered all over Mpu'u and the Yaji. The former choked back a curse, while the latter merely looked grave, as usual. "Well, you can't have them now because they aren't here," said Mpu'u. "You, Exalted, can't. Whatever. Exalted will have to content Exalted self with Saranjis for now." This gets a little gross. "I, Exalted, want a male monkey disguised as Margaret and a female monkey disguised as Varama. Now." "Exalted love of monkeys is laudable," murmured the Yaji uncomfortably. Mpu'u sighed. What sort of court was it where serious colloquies in the inner circle revolved around cross-dressing monkeys? "I'll have the Yellow Minister arrange this business. I have better things to do, like helping run an empire." He took a pinch of waka'a, a kind of drug. Cleaning privies would be a better thing to do, he thought to himself. At least it would be useful. "See to it that Count Skarawada and Pylamor are informed in no uncertain terms of the peril they run in thwarting Exalted will." This was unusually coherent for Exalted. The effects of the waka'a must have worn out. "Blessed, can you take care of that? I need to oversee some executions of revolting peasants. They keep complaining about starving. All they ever seem to think about is food." Oh, come on. Wait, sorry. All they ever seem to think of it is food. Mpu'u was getting bored. Normally he would have unwound with a Saranji or two after the painful interview, but he was beginning to find coupling wearisome. There was just so much of it these days. "Exalted will is my delight. Glorious wisdom is my joy." Probably Malala Ama is getting bored as well. I'll have to change that later. "Get out. Bring on the monkeys. And more waka'a." Ekwekwe sneezed, then belched, then coughed. His counselors crawled out backwards, the prince as quickly as possible, and the Yaji with all deliberate speed. Mpu'u almost slipped on some liquid or other and cursed. And choked back another curse, I'm sorry. Okay. That's that.
You know, I didn't think this week would be a fever dream. And then we talk about cross-dressing monkeys.
Yeah, I forgot about that bit.
I honestly thought this was going to be a relatively stable week. And then... Jesus, man.
I forgot about that bit. Yeah, I kind of forgot.
Did you forget about the fucking porno room, too?
Man, no, I kind of remember that. And that's the kind of guy the Emperor is.
Cross-dressing
I thought I was going to keep my sanity this week with you, but no, you, sir, have subverted my expectations.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Just oh dear.
Poor fucking Tara can't even go a week without trauma.
Well,
It's no wonder my characters have to suffer so.
So it's all my fault. Aviana's woes are all my fault then?
They were, yes, they are exactly your fault.
Figures.
The law about the banning of clothing.
What was that?
A law about the banning of clothing.
Well,
At first, for in all honesty, I thought you were taking inspiration from Mercedes Lackey. I've never read her books, but I don't remember their name. But the name sounded very similar to the ones I've heard from those books.
No,
But
I don't think I've read those.
I don't remember what the book series is called. It's a long running one, supposedly very good. But yeah, and then we get to cross-dressing monkeys.
Yeah, how was the first section?
It's definitely. I think like there's a lot of. I can barely remember it now. Just the cross-dressing monkeys.
Yeah, it's kind of like when Neph read that one story she read, and then I went on a tangent for 10 minutes about a real estate agency. You just get stuck on one concept.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That one line, it makes it memorable.
It makes it, so maybe I should have put off the Imperial.
No, keep it. That should be like a fucking meme, man. Jesus.
Yeah.
It is certainly very, very funny.
Yeah. So poor Muku, the chap at the beginning was running away. He got upstaged by a couple of monkeys who won't even turn up on screen.
Yeah.
It was very much like wasn't it like a history lesson, right?
There's a little bit of exposition involved because he got sent by the Grand Yaji to clean up the Sandaranian court.
Let me ask you both something.
Snakes would be better fate. That's the
Sorry?
other thing I remember.
Let me ask you both. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry. No, I apologize.
You were talking still. Good.
No, I was finished. Go for it.
Okay. Have any of you heard of the movie Cinema Paradiso? This relates, I promise.
No.
I've heard of it.
Okay.
A while ago.
Okay, it's an older movie. Anyways, There's a scene in the movie where bunch of teenagers are watching a romance movie, and they are quite clearly jacking it. It's an Italian film, so they are quite clearly jacking it to this film. I am just imagining now with those pornographic statues that you got like a fucking circle jerk going on around the palace at any given moment.
You probably do. in this palace, you probably do.
You got some kind of fucking circle jerk going on over there.
Yeah, it's not very family friendly palace.
You kind of forgot about that.
I was wondering who was going to do it. I'm not surprised it was Becca.
Of course, we have to always perpetually do the.
While Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces, they certainly haven't forgotten about her.
Well, I kind of forgot about the cross-dressing monkeys. They certainly haven't forgotten about me. Yikes, get them out of here.
Someone get on that, for Christ's sake. Make a meme.
Yeah, I know we already have the pansexual, pan-wielding, rake-wielding raccoon.
Despite what anyone says, we are creating some fine fucking art here.
Yeah, this is the pinnacle, definitely.
This is good rat, indeed.
Indeed.
So there's not too much exposition the first bit, is there?
Dude, I'm not gonna lie. After cross-dressing monkeys, I forgot everything that was being said. I'm not gonna bullshit you.
It was just so incredibly memorable that we were
Damn
just
those
like,
monkeys.
Damn those monkeys! They're always detracting from
darn,
the plot.
dirty monkeys.
Pardon my
Darn,
language.
dirty.
Damn dirty apes!
So, okay. So now,
Yeah, it figures that mine was the least safe for work, despite me being the one who was most.
We're not even
less-
reading the parody
virulently
this.
against. Virulently against. Let's go with that.
I was less keen on that idea. And so it figures that mine is the least safe for work. It's kind of like fate taking revenge on me.
Now I just need to wash everybody's brains out with
With fucking bleach.
with with worse smut.
No, please don't. No, don't even
Yep.
think of it. Yeah, we'll destroy you. We'll kill you. We'll kill you now.
Damn it, done. As the
Damn.
bard, I refuse to be outdone. Heh.
Oh, do you really want it?
No.
I have some really bad smut.
No, we don't want that. No,
I
no,
do.
thank you.
I do have something that where I made smut into art, but that's besides the point.
No, I'm not rapidly changing plans now. I'm just like saying like maybe I need to do that in order to like semi cleanse the brains of people with something worse.
No, we're good.
No,
We're good here.
no, don't even think about it.
I thought that Tarek wanted more.
Tarek realized. Tarek remembered something important that he links this immediately to his family afterwards. So,
What the heck is that guy doing? What is he talking about? Oh my gosh, why are you friends with this person?
Yeah, note that it didn't actually describe anything.
You just said that it.
and that in this case was your greatest failure.
A ham. A ham. A ham.
Show don't tell, Balerion.
No. That's I don't obey any of those rules anyway.
Oh, done. Okay. I think I'm done. I think I'm finished. I gotta stop saying that here. I'm sick of that fucking pun.
I ruined that word.
Yeah. You've ruined that. It's that pun. It makes me just
Which pun was that again?
Done.
Oh
The
god.
the word done is now puns. Is now puntastic.
listen. If I can get mad at Crow for every pun that's in his Smoke and Mirrors comic, I can get mad at you for that too.
Blue says cowards.
I can do it. I can do
No,
it.
no, you can't.
I'll do a recording and then I will put it out.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, go ahead.
But I want somebody there. I need somebody to say whether or not it's bad or not.
It's bad.
No, done. I have an idea. We make this a fucking spectacle here. We get the entire regular writers showcase group out here. It's only for one story, but then at the end, I'm thinking we each can just either give our own reactions. I'll probably turn on the face cam for the first time and go.
That I would actually be cool. I would do that. Yeah, I would just. You'd be like, oh man, Dunn is just such a virgin.
Done. I haven't linked to that yet. Damn.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll do a recording, or maybe a stream where our resident prude is not on.
Hey, listen, I'm down. I'll be in for that. I don't care.
Hashtag proud to be prude.
More like hashtag can't get it up anymore.
Oh man, this is great. I love
You're having a
it.
good day.
Oh, I am having a very good day, despite the fact that I stayed up all night editing and playing video games.
Don't do that. You don't need to get your sleep.
I know.
I don't know. I kind of want to see Dunn unhinged.
Usually.
Well, what happens when a Mormon becomes unhinged after 3 nights of not sleeping?
You don't want to see it.
Yeah, I think
honestly,
so.
like the worst thing is actually like lonely missionaries, like 18 months into their 2-year mission.
Oh, that sounds.
We get weird.
I would think so.
You get weird. If you write celibate, an entire audience celibate, that's a skill in and of itself.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Well, I did share this one particular scene of a book that's like a couple years off. I thought it was earlier, but I realized, no, I'm going to write a little bit more in this universe before I get to that point. She was like, dang, that was hot. And I was like, wow. And this was the Nymphomaniac. And it was a Nymphomaniac who said it.
Maybe that explains it.
Yeah, what can you do?
Okay.
Yeah, Blue's savage. Blue's awesome. Blue's great.
God, I'm probably gonna out myself for this, but I'm just gonna tell you. I'm just gonna say this now because I want attention.
Uh-oh.
Hold on. I once wrote a story for a competition based around this comic on DeviantArt. And it was a story about demons, bondage, fetish shit, you know the types. Anyways, I turned the story into one about tragic addiction, and I won an award for that. It was an art competition, and I won with writing.
That's
not bad.
Actually legitimately impressive.
I gotta find that story. I might share it at some point. Like, there's nothing inherently sexual about it. Like, it doesn't go through it doesn't go through like step-on-step intercourse, if you get what I mean. It's just really about a story about addiction and selling your soul for a Klondike bar.
Oh man, that's hilarious.
Uh,
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not really my style.
None of us
Okay.
like fun.
So, okay. We'll do a recording. Well, I don't know when I'll do it. If I'll do it live, I'll just say, like, I'll read it as just Dunn's dirty little secret, I guess. And I'll just have to...
More about
effect.
Dunn's soul than we needed to know. Keep going.
Dunn exposes himself.
Good God, no. That's a revolting thought right there.
I'm not that bad looking, but yeah, I don't think that would be bad. That would be a good thing.
The eternal trauma of Tarek. Sorry, I'm looking up.
Dunn's dirty little secret, yeah. Yeah, so for setup, for those who are interested, it is a threesome with 3 siblings. Well, the brother's a step sibling.
Yeah, no.
Wow, we just jump right into that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
no.
it's just a preview for those who are like semi-interested.
Where do I pre-order my ticket?
I don't know, honestly. I don't know yet. I'll have to figure it out.
Okay, Dunn, you're disturbed.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
She's not wrong.
Yeah. Oh, where's lines? Where's my pole? Yeah, yeah. I just say like, hey, here's the pole vault. Let me like say all the lines I will cross. I am
Listen, there's nothing wrong with Dunn is saying. You got to keep it in the family. Got to keep the bloodline pure. Just saying.
well,
Yeah.
yeah,
So-
I'm a weird person. Yeah,
No comment.
yes.
You only had to
Indeed.
say that at least once. It's weird I haven't said it yet, actually. Okay, are you ready to go yet?
I think we took a 20-minute tangent for this. I am sorry. It's my fault.
No, it's
Well,
no, it's
kind of-
well, we're only an hour and 15 minutes in, so
Oh,
It's
okay.
my
the
fault,
work
actually.
off, but work is never overdone. I don't know. Well, yeah, okay. So at some point, maybe in the evening when nobody's around, Dunn's Dirty Little Secret will go live, and anybody who wants to be on to react to the smut can come on. How about that?
Okay, you know I'm going to be there. Judging.
You'll be like, yeah, Judge, you'll be like, Dunn, you're such a virgin. Either
Yeah,
that or
I'll
just
for
like you have one of the grossest minds of any Mormon I've ever met.
You're kind of look. I only know like one other Mormon. I haven't seen him in like, oh Lord, it's been years.
Yeah, now I'm reminded of a somewhat rude story about, not terribly rude story, but you might or might not take offense at it, little matter chap.
Wait! I just thought of something. Wasn't the last time a Mormon wrote romance? Didn't we get Twilight?
Is that Mormon?
And I think
Yeah.
Stephanie Meyer was Mormon. Yeah.
Yes,
was Mormon.
Stephanie Myers is a Mormon housewife. Yes.
Yeah, no comment. But where was I? Oh, it's from George Orwell. There was a Mormon missionary, and he's trying to persuade the people. You know, he's trying to convert these homeless people in London. So he's like, if you would just listen to what I'm saying, and they're heckling him, and one person yells, "Effing polygamists," another person yells, "Oh, sorry, ladies, this is going to be slightly offensive." Another chap says, "Well, there's a lot to be said for polygamy. It keeps the effing women out of the job market anyway."
Wow.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
So sorry, ladies.
Oh.
We need to do that one of these days.
Yeah. Alrighty. So.
Because okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm done being distracted.
Okay. Okay. Dunn's Dirty Little Secret will air on. Oh, when would I do it? But when would I do it?
You can decide that later, right?
Yeah, probably. So how to like explain the thing I'm going to be reading next? Okay, so this is definitely a sequel to the Magical Rock concert that I read a little bit ago. So what has happened up to this point? This is actually the second book of the Dark Champion series, and it's kind of in the middle. I've gotten about, I think, like a total of 140 pages written in this book, though it's kind of scattered. Yeah, I'm never doing that. Yeah. So what happens is she's basically doing a service she basically just did a service to this group of people, and now she's kind of trying to go down into this place that will give her an answer, but she doesn't quite know what to do, where the enemy is going to hit next, or like where she's needed. So she goes into this place at the advice of the Mansas or the Mansas, and so this is kind of where the story picks up. Because she needs allies to fight the bad guy. So this is entitled. This story is going to be titled "The Sun Dragon." Before she started walking down the steps down into the depths of the lion's den, Rayla made sure her metal glove was in place. Asen then nodded to Kotar and Jianwen. "Be careful in there," the Mancer remarked, placing his large hand on her shoulder. "You will see many things in there, some of which will be disturbing. Some will show you what might have been if you went on different paths, as well as show you the mistakes of others." The big creature seemed wary. "No one has gone in there except for times of great need, and those who went in last time managed to give their message before they became incoherent. It's worth the risk to prove I'm worthy," Rayla bit her lip. "Besides, I can handle it. I have a slight advantage over most others who go in there." Rayla looked around at the strange crystalline cave, trying to figure out where some of the black stalactites and stalagmites merged, then blended in with the rest of the room. Swallowing, Rayla walked deeper into the room, watching her reflection stared at her, eyes drifting across the strange surface. "This whole place must be some sort of Elangrel." Maria sounded extremely sad as she walked through her eyes. "Belle would have loved this place. Especially studying it would have kept her occupied." Shrugging, Rayla walked deeper into the room, trying to figure out what this place could be. "What do you think this does?" she asked. "They didn't tell me anything about it." "It should be some kind of seer device." Maria seemed to be carefully examining everything around them. "There are quite a few of these, mostly in the form of columns. They would usually provide a look through your family member's eyes, going backward toward a certain point, likely when the device was created. Think of it like a library. It picks out your genealogy and then goes back multiple generations. However, if there's nothing beyond a certain point, either because the records weren't collected or if they were destroyed, there's nothing to see." "Huh." Rayla touched it. "So this was showing my family through the ages up to the point it was created?" "The issue with that is the fact that this isn't a set of columns or even a smaller seeing device, which makes me unsure of what it is." Maria urged her to touch one of the crystal pillars throughout the room. "This place is very old and not manufactured," she said in surprise. "All of the devices from my time are all fabricated, and this has never seen human hands in terms of how it was made. So, did a god or gods make this place?" Rayla asked, slightly excited. "It could be a natural phenomenon," Maria said skeptically, her own bias against any kind of religion clear in her flat tone. "I'll accept reincarnation since I have no other options. But I have to say that unless a god shows up and talks to me, I'm not going to believe that they exist." Sighing, Rayla let the matter lie and tapped on the crystal column with a small bit of Isissa. Instantly, the world rocked and her vision clouded over. The floor melted and she found herself dropping into a pool of water. But it didn't go into her mouth. She just floated in a viscous, liquidious, one of Maria's weird words, substance. Maria was yelling in the back of her mind that something was very wrong as they hunt, then was abruptly silenced. The world around Rayla spun and roiled, becoming completely dark, then brightly lit, then dark again. After what felt like an eternity, she floated in calm emptiness, and Rayla started as she saw Maria floating next to her. It was strange to see the short, dark-skinned, middle-aged woman standing beside her, rather than just a disembodied voice at the back of her head. "Well, this is interesting," the older woman remarked, eyes glancing around at their surroundings. "How did we get out of here? That's assuming that we can get out of here." Rayla stared into the darkness, somewhat unnerved by how there was infinite blackness, but she could still see her friend next to her. Abruptly, the shadows coalesced into a small kitchen in a hut, where a young woman and what looked to be her mother working on what Rayla recognized as herb potions for medicinal purposes. Curious, Rayla glanced out of the window, noting that the landscape was heavily forested, with very little in the way of civilization. "I don't understand why we can't leave, Mother," the girl was saying. "They hate us. They all do. Why can't you see that?" "Because there are people who need me," the older woman smiled. "You'll understand someday, Lana, I promise." "These people are disgusting," Lana spat to the side. "They're petty bigots who think that intelligence and education is synonymous with witchcraft. That is their choice. Ois, what matters is our choices, not theirs," the mother said firmly. "Lana, there are still people who come to us in need of our abilities. It is our duty to help them. They should respect us," Lana muttered. "We're better than them." As she glared at her mother, Rayla noticed something about her that startled her. It was as if there were a twinned appearance between her and the girl, even though they looked barely alike. Rayla had a rounded face and brown hair. This one was blonde and angular. "Do you feel that?" Maria asked. "There's a strange kinship between me and her. Is it the same for you?" "Yeah," Rayla admitted, watching this woman with renewed interest. There was a bitterness, a tightness about Lana's grim expression. It seemed like she was perpetually dissatisfied, unwilling to listen to what her mother was saying. Abruptly, Rayla saw something through the window, a group of torches moving through the trees directly at the small house. Lana's eyes widened and made as if to leave, but her mother put her hand on her shoulder. "No, I will handle this." She said calmly, adjusting her dress and dusting up the remnants of the plant she'd been grinding. "But, Mother," Lana protested. "No, I won't allow you to go out there and risk yourself." Lana's mother put her hand on her daughter's shoulder. Casually, the older woman walked out of the hut and onto the patio outside to confront a crowd of rough fur and wool-clad villagers holding rusted weapons or farm implements. "Good evening," she called. "Is there a person or persons that are in need of our healing arts?" "Damned witch!" One of the women, a blacksmith looking person in the crowd, yelled, just as a man called out, "Our crops are bad because of you and that daughter of yours." "We have only ever helped you," Mother remarked, looking around at the crowd, likely to find someone who she had helped. When she couldn't find anyone, she wilted ever so slightly. "If you wish to try me, I will be happy to go before the town magistrate." "We know you ensorcelled our good magistrate," another woman, this one a pretty, if pinch-faced blonde woman, a bit older than the woman on the porch. "When you helped him, you put a spell on him. We have to take justice for ourselves and be free in our town of you and your witch daughter." She pointed at Lana, who had come out of the house to stand next to her mother, looking terrified. "Please, let's be reasonable." The woman cut off as a rock was flung from the crowd and slammed into the side of her head, knocking her to the ground. Lana screamed, and suddenly Rayla was behind her eyes, feeling her pain. Lana bent down beside her mother, a strange kind of healing construct coming out of her and into her mother, Elena. The name and various memories is rising inside Rayla as the other woman tried to desperately to rouse her mother. To Lana, and by extension Rayla's horror, she found that her mother's eyes were unblinking. With a terrible scream of rage, Lana stood up and grasped onto Isis's power, and then Iran. How is this possible? Maria's voice next to hers made Rayla jump. Then she settled down when she realized who it was. We didn't have access to Iran freely until a few centuries ago. When is this taking place? This seems very primitive. Ignoring her friend as she kept on rambling, Rayla just watched as Lana turned on the crowd, cold fury in the mind. She could feel how angry, how bitter, how hurt the woman was. How dare you! Lana screamed, causing the crowd to back away, likely because of the aura of fear emanating from anybody who held the dark power. Now you will see what you have awakened. Raising her hand, Lana unleashed Isis and Iran into the crowd like a barrage of arrows from an unfeeling firing squad. Men and women, even a few teenagers who had stupidly tagged along with their elders in search of excitement, died in a series of horrifically gruesome fashions that Layla would have thrown up if she had possessed any control of her own body. Some of them dropped to the ground screaming as blood streamed from their ears, eyes, and mouth, darkening their clothes. Others weren't so fortunate. Some simply exploded, either into pieces or had their heads crushed. Some had their bones ripped from their bodies and turned into projectiles sent into their fellows who fell with shards of bone in their bodies. Lana kept on hurling power into their midst, some of them bursting into flame as she sent fire constructs into them. Relentlessly, she kept on going even after the people started running away. She sent out hunting tendrils of power that grasped onto and killed the stragglers. How is she able to do this? Maria wondered, watching the display of visceral brutality with a mixture of horror, fascination, and disbelief. Who exactly taught her all this? Maybe he's feeding her. Rayla trailed off. She noticed a dark aura at the corner of her eye and sometimes in her head. Ah, Rayla thought as Lana glared around, snarling in anger. She searched for another target to vent her fury. He's helping her. Iran. How? Maria asked in shock. He was bound outside of time a long time ago. I guess that was something that came after this. Rayla thought as Lana reached out to Iran and transported herself to the town. A dirt street, slightly run-down looking thatched house right behind her. No, she whispered as she felt Lana's intentions, the strange connection they'd been forced to take part in. She can't be. The townspeople started running into the wood, or in a few cases, stone houses, as soon as Lana appeared in the center of the town, and started killing anything that moved, including the animals. Every living thing that Lana saw, she turned to ash or chunks of blood without remorse. Rayla felt an unimaginable level of stark horror as she watched the woman relentlessly kill and kill until her clothes were soaked with blood. There was no guilt, no remorse, just fury and a horrifying bloodlust that Rayla had to shrink away from. The worst part was the children. Despite not having one, Rayla started hyperventilating as she saw Lana mercilessly, though less gruesomely, kill the children, even when their mothers tried to shield them from their wrath. How is she able to do something this horrible? She wondered as Lana walked through the town, the horrifying rage burning inside Rayla, almost as she were completely inside Lana's head. I had to be unable to do anything else but just wildly unleash my powers or get burned up. And even then it was a mistake. What has been done to her that has made her willing to do something like this? Superstitious people who are indebted to or suspicious of those who have knowledge different than them are always prone to hurt people, Maria said flatly. History is littered with the bodies of educated women and women who are trying to help either through herbal or higher learning, different belief systems, you name it. All of them dead because of the bigotry bigotry that it comes from people who lack empathy or understanding. So you and religion, essentially. Rayla tried taking any option of distracting her with what she was being forced to watch and experience. I do not hate religion. I just believe it is worthy only of my apathy. Maria seemed to shrug. I let them be, but if they engage me in discourse, I will destroy their lack of facts and logic in a verbal duel. Fair enough. Rayla had to admit that wasn't an unfair way of looking at things. Finally, Lana dropped to her hands and let out a terrible scream. Clutching the blood-soaked dirt in the street, she unleashed a storm of black fire in all directions. Rayla flinched back from the horrible pain and rage of her host's outburst. The black fire consumed the town like fatwood, leaving nothing behind but a large field of blackened earth where blood and bodies and broken wood had been. For a moment, Lana looked as if she were trying to pull so much of the source and that she'd killed herself, but she just let it go. For whatever reason, Rayla thought she could hear Aran laughing. As Lana stared at the ground, tears dripping onto the dirt, the only place that still had blood in the whole area. Rayla felt horrified as she felt the memories of the other woman felt in her head. She saw years of trying to help the people, being spat upon for being a witch by those who didn't understand what they could do. Her mother Elena doing whatever she could to shield her from everything, but Lana noticed that her mother was selling her body for protection from the mob. Then came the day when a drunk guard came from the town demanding sexual favors. Lana had unconsciously unleashed her powers and killed the man who had been threatening her mother. After that, the village turned on them. How Rayla had known how to use her powers, she didn't know. It had just come to her in a moment of panic, like someone was feeding her the information. Her right arm flared with pain as the mark of a sun encasing a dragon had burned itself into her arm. Swallowing instinctively, Rayla watched as Lana sank to the ground, seemingly utterly exhausted. But before the last of her energy left, a random burst of power teleported her way into what looked like an open savanna type area. Abruptly, the vision ended, and Rayla was standing beside Lana as she walked through the streets of a strange, unfamiliar tropical city. Shall I keep going?
If you want, I'm into it. This seems interesting enough.
Up to you. And at least our minds are cleaned now.
Yeah.
Let me show you something from the comments quickly, though. Let's see. Where is it? Hi, Hypatia. Weirdly, this is less disturbing than the tangent you missed. because she says, wow, did I come back to a horror? And she says,
yeah.
And Becca says,
Carrie.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah.
Who's Carrie?
From the Stephen King book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Delinar. Okay, yeah. Delinar part again.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of a castle or palace, the city had a large pyramid in the center, and the people here wore loose, billowy clothing. Lionesses and leopard motifs were all over the buildings, including statues giving it an artistic if rustic feeling. Rayla sensed Lana's unease and suspicion, images of the townspeople rushing at her like starving wolves flying through her head. What do you think is the connection? Rayla asked as she and Maria followed the other woman through the city. It was definitely not like any of the advanced cities she'd seen. So this must have been in the very distant past if this was considered a city. I don't know, the older woman admitted, eyes glancing around at the squared buildings and the pyramid at the center of the city with a significant amount of interest. I have no idea what the city is. Whatever it is, this place is thousands of years in the past. The pyramids were only put up by eccentrics who wanted to have a unique private residence in defiance of all building achievements. None of them were that size, though, she added. Interesting, Rayla thought as Lana walked through the streets, looking suspicious of everyone around her. Maria tapped her chin thoughtfully, eyes clearly analyzing what was around her. I wonder what the significance of this moment is. Unless we're just going through randomized moments in this woman's life. She tilted her head. It is an interesting experience, I have to say. That's one way of putting it, Rayla said bluntly. This event has already happened, Rayla. Maria's tone was lecturing. This is just a person who we can learn from the mistakes of. Just look at it like getting the answers for a school examination. I never went to school, Rayla said automatically. Maria began rubbing her eyes in frustration. I hate this time period, she muttered. Fine. Think of it like seeing someone perform a musical number before you do. It allows you to assess them and make it so that you can avoid what they've done. Ah. That makes more sense, Rayla said slowly. Maybe you should explain things like that. Force of habit, it's not my fault you're primitive. Maria smiled to take the edge off her comment. Abruptly, Lana walked into a large stone building with the appearance of an inn, adjusting her pack so that she could easily take it off while keeping it close. Not quite knowing what they were going into, Rayla and Maria just kept on following. Sighing, Lana sat down, just as a small group of men and women wearing similar clothes entered the common room. Blinking, Rayla had to take a closer look at these new arrivals. She noticed immediately that they were wearing clothing closer to what Rayla would see in Randon Field, though much thinner. The women wore muted dresses that weren't as thick as normal due to the heat, but the style was similar, as were the sleeveless shirts that the three men were wearing, though two of them had more fine material. As she watched them take a seat and eat on the table next to Lana, Rayla noticed that one of the women, an unnaturally tall brunette, and one of the men, a slightly shorter, elegant, dark-haired and skinned man, seemed to be the leaders. She seemed, you could tell by how the younger, less refined-looking folks appeared that they were watching them for direction. We should be able to reach Dargathos in a few days, the dark-haired skinned man said. We need to ensure that we don't attract undue attention. We promise we won't, sir, a young blonde man promised, just as the shorter olive-skinned girl nodded eagerly. Hopefully, we'll be able to see the city, though, Lady Durabi, the second man remarked, a dark-haired, golden-skinned figure who was slightly shorter than the others, but he seemed to have an eagerness the others didn't have. For whatever reason, everyone except for him seemed somewhat nervous. Firmly, the blonde woman placed a hand on the table. No, we do not want to draw the attention of the Anubarax, especially not their seekers. She leaned forward intently. Do not go anywhere without myself or Porus with you. I want to ensure that the three of you are safe. Okay, the tall blonde envoy agreed. For some reason, Lana seemed to be paying quite a bit of attention toward that particular boy. Then, abruptly, she walked over them and stopped short and swerved around the group without talking to them. The next thing she knew, the world vanished and was replaced by the group running toward a gate, pursued by a group of men and women wearing beetle-mandible dog helmets, carrying crossbows. Rayla and Maria watched as Lana ran beside him, clearly having warned them or perhaps drawn attention to them. But the attitude of the group of people seemed to hint at a positive opinion. She probably warned them because of her experience with the people in her town, Maria mused, folding her arms and then tapping her fingers against her forearm. Something is just not quite coming together with this scenario for me. Hopefully what we're seeing establishes some sort of pattern soon. Rayla had an idea, but she didn't want to say it. The thought was far too horrifying for her to consider. The children dead, then being obliterated. It was as if she were seeing history repeat in reverse, as if this were a cycle that she'd continued when she'd lost control in Barataria. Before the small group of 6 could reach the gates, a group of soldiers wearing thin cloth armor, wearing an emblem of a hound with beetle legs and a carapace tattooed across their foreheads, appeared, all of them on horses. In unison, they presented their spears toward them as the group of 6 halted. "Halt, Tharsic filth," one of the pursuers remarked, drawing a scythe-like sword. "You cannot touch us with your vile powers, and now you will be cleansed of your impurities." "No!" Lana raised her arms before they could close in. She seized a hold of Iran without a terrible smile on her face. Rayla flinched as she felt herself flick into Lana's head. You could feel the woman drawing a tremendous amount of Iran into her, so much so that Rayla was scared she'd kill herself, but for whatever reason, her capacity kept increasing. Memories started flowing into her, a string of betrayals, both against Lana and perpetrated by her, just to stay alive and away from the Anubarak zealots who wanted to purge the world of all those who could use the source. Their strange silvery amulets that prevented Cyrus and Issa from touching them gave the Seekers, their elite hunters, an edge over them. They tried attacking her, but with Iran, she managed to kill them before they got to her. The main thing that sickened Rayla was how happy Lana was that she got to kill the Anubaraks. Instead of directly attacking the zealots, Lana used Iran in a way that Rayla had never seen before to create a small circular construct that began rotating rapidly. Instantly, the Anubaraks started screaming as blood particles were sucked up into the construct and then transformed into vicious blood red crystal projectiles that shot toward the poor souls guarding the door. They fell to the ground, pierced by crystalline blood arrows. "What was?" the woman Darabi yelled, but Lana cut her off through the simple expedient of raising her hand and sending a blast of power forward. Instantly, the wood and metal shattered, clearing a path for them. "Come on!" she yelled, ushering them forward. Rayla and Maria followed the group as they fled into what looked like a desert. A dry, arid landscape extended out in front of them as they ran into the wilderness. As soon as Lana and the others got outside the city, Darabi and Polis created some kind of paired illusion construct that allowed them to run on unseen, while an ethereal version of them drew away the pursuers down a ravine, while they hid it in the open several miles away. "What did you do?" Darabi asked as the small group bunked down for the night. "I didn't feel or see anything." Lana flinched, but she glared at the other woman. "It's just something I can do," she explained, raising her hand, creating a fireball of black fire constructed entirely of Iran. "At least, I'm the only one who I've met who can do it." Darabi examined the flame, slightly wary, but she nodded. "Well, if you'd like, I would very much like to bring you with us. You would be extremely valued where we're going." "I'll go, I guess." Lana glanced at the blonde-haired man who Rayla knew was named Michael, a strong sense of attraction clear in her stance and expression. There was a blur and reformed into Lana and Michael experimenting with Iran, showing that they had marks on their arms, though Michael's mark was as a lion rather than a dragon. "I never thought I'd find someone who could do what I do," Lana remarked, comparing her mark to Michael's. "So what brought you out here?" "Darabi found me, my brother, and my sister in a small town north of here," Michael explained. "We never really heard of the source, let alone what you have. We all wanted to find something worth more than just living as a saddle maker's son and his wife." "Well, I'm glad that I could find you," Lana smiled and patted his arm. The world shifted, then solidified into Lana and Michael kissing, and what initially looked like wrestling in a desert hollow. They weren't wearing anything but their skins. Grimacing at the realization of what was going on, Rayla averted her eyes, while Maria sighed in irritation. "It's awkward," Rayla defended herself, more than a little abashed. It's life. Maria gave the impression of rolling her eyes, but she did let her know when they'd stopped and pulled their clothes around themselves like blankets. So, what do you think? Lana asked, leaning backward. We have power that no one else has. Let's leave, just the two of us. I don't want to leave my brother, Michael said. I could just go off and leave him. I can't leave Olivia either. Well, then let's take them with us. Lana leaned up. We can all do this together. The Anubaraks need to be removed so that the people they're hunting don't have to live in fear anymore. With you and me able to use this third power, we can find others like us. Michael thought for a moment, but nodded. All right, let's go, he said. For whatever reason, Rayla felt a horrible feeling of dread as the vision faded to Michael and Lana at a small, slightly ruined castle on an island where the small beginnings of a town were being built. Olivia and Markin were watching as teaching a group of teenagers to use Cyrus and Isissa in terms of forming a wall. All over the place were people using all three powers to construct buildings, though Aran was the most commonly used. We've built something good here, Michael remarked, putting his hand on Lana's shoulder. I didn't think we made the right choice, but it seems as though we're doing well. With the construction of Averlon, we'll be able to ensure that this is a place where we don't have to worry about the Anubaraks hunting people like us. Lana grinned and leaned her shoulder against his. So, have you thought about what I asked you a few weeks ago? Michael asked, sounding tentative as he rubbed her shoulder. Honestly, yes, she smiled. You and me, we're connected. Might as well make it official. So, you'll marry me? Michael said eagerly. Of course I will. Lana kissed him. The vision shifted to Lana and Michael in what looked like some kind of religious circular building with a large group of people wearing either a moon dragon design on the clothes for their men or a lion sun dragon for the women surrounding the two, with Lana wearing a deep white and gold dress while Michael wore silver and black. The two knelt in the center of the building, hands across an altar with the moon and sun on it. We are bound, she said in unison, for all time and throughout the eternities. As soon as they said the vow, they stood up and exchanged what looked like a pair of gloves. Rayla gasped when she saw that one of them was the same glove that she wore, only Lana was giving it to Michael. For whatever reason, when he put the glove on, the object molded itself to his larger hand. The glove that Michael gave to Lana was more of a slim feminine gauntlet with a set of 4 gems on the knuckles made of a reddish metal that Rayla couldn't quite identify. I have seen that metal before, but I've never seen it as an amplifier, Maria remarked. It's essentially indestructible, but it doesn't hold an edge. I wonder how they made it, especially during this time of war. You can make an amplifier easily during a time of peace where you can essentially push your own power out of yourself constantly into an object. The longer you funnel power, the more powerful the amplifier. But if it's the same object, they would have to funnel power into it for a constant rate for years. Maybe Iran allowed them to make the time shorter, Rayla suggested as they raised their hands, turning their gloves into swords to the adulation of the crowds. Michael's blade was a rapier suiting his thin build, but Lana's was a slightly curved weapon that retained the red of the gauntlet. The world shifted again, and this time Lana and Rayla were on a large elevated platform overlooking a battlefield. It looked as though the Anubaraks had joined with another group of source users, likely in an attempt to get rid of this new upstart faction. The army they were overseeing was small, but they had a number of Iran-using source users, which gave them an advantage facing what looked like an army. The main advantage was that Lana and Michael had their immensely powerful amplifiers, allowing them to unleash deadly construct after deadly construct into their enemies as their own forces used hit-and-run tactics. Lana's weapon was equally as powerful as Michael's, which, according to Maria, made it one of the most, if not the most, powerful female amplifier in existence. So, what I'm wondering is where in the world is that one? Maria wondered as she examined the woman's gloved hand, eyes clinical. I'm amazed that the one we have managed stayed hidden all this time, but there might be answers to that particular pair of mysteries here in this series of visions. Lana and Michael looked tired, so apparently this battle had been going on for quite a long time. Eventually they began taking turns, with one of them attacking while the other one rested. I wonder what time period this is, Maria mused. There seems to be something of an advanced state in this place in terms of constructs, Elongrel, and amplifiers, but there are lower numbers of source users. Could history have gone through a set of cycles, Maria asked, where we're in a relatively primitive point where just before all these fancy advancements you had came to be? This is significantly longer ago than my era, so it's likely there were multiple cycles of boom and bust in terms of technology. Maria chewed her lip, a realization dawning on her face. This must have been more than 10,000 years ago, she gasped. We're seeing the formation of early source user civilization, where it turned from something feared into respected figures. Just as Maria came to that conclusion, an earthquake struck the platform and caused it to implode outward, sending both of them plummeting to the ground. Michael was fortunate to roll away from the structure, only suffering a blow to the head, but Lana was not so lucky. The tower collapsed in on her, rubble crushing into her back, leg, and hand, irreparably crushing her fingers and leg. It covered her nearly completely, likely giving the impression she was dead already. Still, she was able to remain conscious and see what happened next clearly through a slit in the cracked wood. Men and women wearing a strange contraption across their face in the shape of a wolf-headed beetle appeared out of the underbrush, grabbing Michael and quickly fleeing away from the battlefield with their prize. A few moments later, a group of horse users who wore the sun and moon dragons came up to the collapsed platform, clearing away the rubble to find Lana lying there, the fingers on her left hand completely destroyed and her leg hanging on only by a thread of skin. Though the fact that a large log fell on her leg had probably acted as a crude tourniquet. The next scene was of Lana screaming inside a sterile hospital room as she found out she lost all of the fingers except her thumb on her left hand, and her leg had been amputated below the knee. Why are we watching this? Rayla wondered aloud, looking away and trying to block out the sounds of Lana screaming, not just about her fingers and her leg, but about Michael. A pair of teenagers came to the room, looking very much like her and Michael. This is just horrible. I don't know, Maria admitted, putting her hand on Rayla's shoulder. It's going to be all right. It's all right, Mother. The girl held Lana in her arms. We're here. The next scene was of Lana standing in front of a stake where Michael had been impaled on a large wooden spike along with a number of other source users in a forest of bodies, each branded with a set of unfamiliar letters arranged in a circle across their chest. Lana wasn't crying as she looked up at her husband, who was missing a hand where they'd hacked it off to remove his amplifier. Lana was wearing her gauntlet over her damaged hand, and she seemed to have some sort of metallic leg right under her skirt. Maria examined the leg, carefully cataloging how it worked. This represents the fate of those who would make themselves gods, Maria read, seeming intrigued, if in a morbid fashion. Rayla managed to hold on down her bile for about 5 seconds before she ran off and vomited. Or tried to. Nothing came up. She was just dry heaving. The smell of the rotting, impaled bodies was sickening after what had happened. I must admit, this is a rather disturbing sight. Maria's voice was clinical, if carefully controlled. This cannot continue, Lana said flatly. They can't keep doing this to us. They can't be allowed to get away with this. For a moment, Rayla was forced into Lana's mind, the stark fury in her mind surpassing even the rage at her mother's murder. Start sending spies into Anubarak, Derek, she remarked to her son. We need to retrieve your father's amplifier. And then once we have it, We will kill all of them. Derek nodded and vanished in an Iran teleportation construct. For a moment, Lana glared up at her husband's body, fury clear in her eyes. I will make them pay for what they did, she snarled. They will drown in oceans of blood and fire before I am finished with them. The next vision was of Lana and her son riding at a gallop through the streets of what looked like an Anubarak city, eyes frantic as a group of beetle device-wearing source users pursued them. The two should be able to construct a portal or teleport away, but they kept going on horses. For a brief moment, Lana and his mind pulled Rayla in, and immediately she felt the sense of horrible emptiness, very similar to how she'd felt at home in Random Field. So this is where the source blocker, or at least the thing that was based on, was created, Maria remarked, tapping her finger against her lips. Overall, she seemed less disturbed and more analytical of what they were seeing, which Rayla couldn't understand. All this brutality horrified her, and she had the feeling that it wasn't nearly over. The two managed to ride out, or at least be on the block, but for whatever reason they couldn't create a portal or teleport using Iran. Just outside the city, a people wearing the Moon and Sun dragons rode up, blocking the advance of Anubarak troops with a wall of rock. The riders kept on going and going, and then the vision shifted and they were camped in the middle of a large rocky field. Abruptly, a rider wearing the Sun Dragon on a small shield attached to her shoulder rode up to Lana. Lana, he called. There are at least 7 Anubarak armies coming toward our position. They have us surrounded. Lana rose to her feet, flexing her maimed hand and where her husband's glove now rested. Good, she said grimly. Send up the signal and prepare to bunker down. Are you sure? The man asked, sounding skeptical and somewhat afraid. I want them to commit as much as possible to attempt to kill me and retrieve their prize. Lena raised her gloved hand for emphasis. And I want to make them bleed for what they've done. This is the point where we lay everything on the line, and there's no going back. The man nodded, then firmed his jaw. The next moment, Rayla and Maria stood behind the barricade, a shield of air around the camp with what looked like tens of thousands of Anubaraks surrounding it. Lana was deflecting the enemy constructs one after the other as they bombarded the fortifications. I don't know how long we can hold, the scout who'd warned Lana about the incoming army gazed out to the massive troops. We're keeping them off with your power, but this battle is at a stalemate. The signal has been sent up, Lana remarked as she destroyed another dozen constructs. It's just a matter of holding out until our reinforcements arrived. You may have doomed us. The man shook his head and sent out a blast of Cyrus and Iran. We're trapped here with no means of escape. We have them right where we want them. Lana sent down a bolt of lightning from the sky to blast a section of the enemy, but it was blocked and only a few people were killed by the attack. It's just a matter of time. Have faith that justice is coming. I hope you're right. He shook his head and kept on attacking. The fight went on for a few more agonizing moments. Then Rayla noticed a few points of Iran in the sky. Then more, until there were hundreds in the sky that descended into the shield and began attacking the enemy. Several of the enemy's source users tried to strike, but they seemed to be not able to use Iran, giving the flying source users an advantage. Rapidly, the source users were dropped into the barricade, using Iran to allow them to pass through the barrier and landing on the ground. We've arrived with 500 of Iran's children, Mother. The young man that Rayla recognized as Lana's oldest son, Arthur, rode up to her and handed her the gauntlet amplifier. We're prepared to push them back and start evacuating. No, Rayla said calmly as she slid her hand into the middle glove. This is the moment I've been working towards my whole life. I don't understand, Arthur said as Derek walked to the attack line and began rapping out orders. You've done your part, my son. Lana flexed her maimed hand at her gauntlet, drawing a horribly large amount of both Isissa and Iran, though Isissa was even greater in Iran through the two gloves. Abruptly, Rayla was pulled into Lana's mind and was horrified by the sheer raw force of Iran that raged inside the woman. No human should be able to hold that much power, she whispered as the rest of the children of the Iran came together in a line. Hundreds and hundreds of sorcerers are preparing for something that would change the world as they knew it. Children of Iran! Lana's voice did not boom. Instead, it simply connected to all the sorcerers aligned with her. For too long we have been held back, treated as inferior creatures. This day, this hour, this moment, that will change. They nodded in approval. They have killed your friends and family and enslaved others. No longer. Mother, what are you doing? Arthur asked, sounding distinctly uneasy. Showing them what we can do, she said calmly. Raise the barrier enough to allow them to push toward our position. I want them to think that we've won. Immediately, the barrier rose and the enemy started surging through. Now let the work of death begin. Lana's cruel smile made Ayla want to throw up again. Kill them just as I told you to. Without a word, all of the sorcerers grabbed hold of Iran, and then the Anubarak troops began to die. Rayla wanted to turn away, but she was trapped inside Lana as she unleashed her own deadly construct. It seemed as though the woman had instructed her followers to utilize the most gruesome and horrific methods of killing their enemies possible. Men were pulled into the air and ripped limb from limb. Others exploded or had pieces of them destroyed, causing them to writhe on the ground if it wasn't their heads. Others had disgusting trees abruptly burst out of their chests and mouths while they were still alive, many of them silently screaming around the thorny plants that now emerged from their bodies. A whisper of something in Lana's ear made Rayla cringe, a constant stream of information regarding how best to kill them in as brutal a fashion as could be devised. Lana herself was a storm of at least 3 dozen constructs at a time, crystals bringing up from the ground and impaling Anubarak troops. However, they remained alive. That was the worst part. If Lana was simply killing them, that would be one thing, but it seemed as if these attacks were designed to kill in the most painful ways they could devise. The enemy slave source users tried attacking, but Lana blocked the attacks and sent out Seeker construct that directed her own troops to kill the enemy. Finally, they began to flee, and Arthur came up to his mother, face ashen. Mother, they are fleeing. We won. He rubbed his mouth. Surely the slaughter has only begun. Lana smiled and gestured toward a group of Iran source users. Go, use your constructs to move around the battlefield and kill anyone who attempts to flee. What? Arthur asked, shock clear in his voice. I know your soft heart, my boy. Lana pulled up her gauntlet and just shoved her maimed hand into her face. I want all of them exterminated for what they've done. I want them all to fear what we can do. They deserve this. Face growing more and more gray, Arthur remained silent as Lana walked forward and raised her hand, the golden glove gleaming with an even much brighter light than the darker gauntlet on the other. Without a word, she floated into the air and erected a new barrier, trapping the enemy in the killing field. Men and women slammed against the barrier, spikes emerging to both impale and shove through the people of the people backward. Despite the spikes, the trapped Anubarak soldiers attempted to try climbing up the slick surface like rats in a cage. The children of Iran emerged from behind the barrier, and then the real slaughter began. Rayla was forced to watch as tens of thousands of soldiers were relentlessly butchered by the source users, the methods of the attacks just as disturbing as they corralled the enemy into a kill zone with the intent of complete annihilation. The worst part of the whole thing was riding behind Lana's eyes. She gleefully killed the trapped people. For her, it was the village all over again, and she was a young girl attacking wildly in retribution for all that she'd lost. More and more died on the fringes until finally they began scrambling over each other to get to the center, if only to preserve their lives for a little bit longer. Without remorse, the work of death continued, the Anubarax continuing to trample each other as they attempted to get away from the enemy for a little bit longer, only to slip in all the bloody mud that had become of the field. The butchery continued for nearly a solid hour, until finally the Anubarak army was either ripped limb from limb, turned to crystal, trees, or otherwise brutally slaughtered. Exulting in the destruction, Lana lowered herself to the ground among the blood and broken bodies that stained the once vibrant landscape. At long last, she raised her hands and closed her armored fist. But this isn't enough. Nothing can ever be enough. Abruptly, Rayla was standing beside her, the horrible smell of battle crashing into her along with the stench of broken and destroyed bodies. Unable to hold it in, Rayla doubled over and started dry heaving again. Maria swallowed hard as if she were fighting back a similar instinct. Wiping her mouth, Rayla straightened and tried not to look at the ground below her. It was a scene from nightmares. Bodies broken by twisted growths of plants, black crystals are ripped to shreds. "Mother!" Arthur called. "Are you all right?" Incongruously, Lana began laughing. Not the laughter of madness. A pure, joyful sound that would have been completely normal to hear after a joke or a present long awaited. "I am, Arthur," she kept on laughing as she embraced her son. "It is almost over." "What are you talking about?" Arthur demanded, adjusting at the carnage all around them. "Surely this is the end of the war." "No. There must be one final remembrance of what we do to our enemies," she said. "However, I am the only one who shall do this thing once I am sufficiently rested." "Mother, this is already an act that will make people here turn against us," he insisted. "You cannot do worse than this." "Oh, I can." Lana's smile was a strange rictus of both cruelty and pleasure. "There is one last thing that I can do." "What?" Arthur demanded. "Destroying the rest of Anubarak," she said, a terrible eagerness in her voice. "That's impossible." Arthur put his hands on her shoulders. "You can't do anything to them. It's impossible." "Just wait." Lana pushed his hands off her shoulders. "You will see soon." The next vision was immediately disorienting for Rayla as they appeared in the air high above the ground, looking down at the city that had stolen Michael's amplifier from. Raising her hands, Lana began drawing in as much of Iran and Isis as she could, along with hundreds of source users. Through the amplifiers and various source users, Lana held more power than any human should ever be able to. The air itself around her warped and shifted, fear permeating the landscape. She could feel reality screaming as Lana started sending cables of power so thick they almost obscured the sky high above the defenses of the blocking device. Rayla could audibly hear the voice of Iran whispering in her ear, feeding her a specific and deadly construct. It wasn't a directly lethal construct as had been used on the battlefield, but it held far more potential for destruction than anything Rayla had seen. Eyes becoming windows into black fire, Lana screamed in both exultation and pain as she began tearing a hole in the fabric of reality itself, the world screaming in unison with her. Rayla flinched and covered her ears, then she was inside Lana's head. The sudden explosion of power inside her made Rayla gasp. How is she not going insane from this much of Iran's might? Vaguely, she noticed that a few of Lana's source users had collapsed, clutching their heads, eyes becoming black, completely black from overuse. Maria? Rayla whispered, do you think this is going to work? I think it is. Maria sounded actually horrified for the first time this entire vision. With another scream, Lana ripped open the portal to reveal an endless blackness with small pricks of light in the distance. They were overshadowed by one burning ball of fire. Is that? Rayla couldn't finish. Yes, Maria whispered. She's ripped open a portal to the sun. Iran's whispers kept murmuring in Lana's ear, directing her to pull 3 chunks of burning gas from outside of their atmosphere and pulling it in through the portal. She did so, then hurled the 3 explosive chunks toward the city, creating a barrier around the area to prevent what was about to happen from affecting the troops. A trio of bright, burning lights appeared and then flashed above the city. Despite herself, Rhea found herself gazing in rapt attention as the stone melted and the people evaporated into mist from the intense heat. The land behind the barrier turned to blasted, broken rock. Not even a remnant of the city that had once been there remaining. Slowly, Lana drifted to the ground, eyes still burning. Closing her fist, she released all 3 powers, then raised her eyes toward the sun. Now we shall end this war forever, she whispered. With this new weapon, their cities will all burn. Shadows, Rayla blanched. She's going to use that again? Evidently so. Maria rubbed her eyes. How is this possible? No one should be able to do that. It took hundreds of Iran source users to make that, Rayla said, along with both of those amplifiers. Yes, but that much even to one of the Exalted is not healthy. Maria nodded to a group of soul users where at least half had dropped to the ground, clutching their heads and screaming. Who could defeat this? She had to have been defeated or killed by something. Otherwise, more of that would have been common. It's been thousands of years. Maria shook her head. She's likely long dead. How exactly, I don't know, but she has to be. Their conversation was cut off by the vision shifting. Lana stood with Arthur and a group of source users, though they seemed to be against the dark-haired woman. We cannot allow this to continue, Mother, he said firmly, the amplifier that had once been her father's, that Rayla now possessed, on his hand. I know your pain, but this is wrong, deeply, deeply wrong. I don't care, Lana said, rubbing her gauntleted hand. This will never be over until they're all dead. They are offering to give us peace, he countered, as long as we give them the place where people can live separate from us. No, there is no mercy for them after what was done. Lana shook her hand in Arthur's face. Please, Mother, there is a chance to have a long-lasting peace with safety for everyone in our family and people. It's an unimaginable possibility that we should be able to have this after all this war and death, Arthur pleaded. We can't fight anymore. I will never stop fighting, Lana screamed, and if you attempt to help my enemies, then I will kill you. I will not allow you to do this. Arthur's glove extended into a long sword, the black blade glowing bright red. What are you going to do? Lana snarled. Without a word, she vanished, appearing in a plain outside the city. Raising a gauntlet, she opened her portal, only it was much smaller. Before it could open, though, Arthur appeared and slashed it out of the sky with a powerful explosion of Cyrus and Iran. Snarling, Lana turned on her son and attacked, but Arthur blocked the attack. How dare you, she screamed at him. I can't let you do this. Arthur raised his glowing red sword. Father would never have wanted you to do something like this. If you try it, I will stop you. A glow on his arm caused Rayla to find depicting what looked like a horse with a long horn on his forehead. Lana's own sun dragon mark began glowing as if in response to her son. High above them, a storm gathered, a pair of creatures matching their march formed in the dark clouds appearing in the air. Orange from the dark clouds appearing in the air. You have betrayed me and sided with them! Lana yelled, then unleashed a binding construct at him. Arthur teleported away, then lashed out with one of his own. Lana screamed and then began attacking with more aggressive construct in order to distract him from another binding one. But he managed to strike all of them out of the air before leaping forward, sword extended. Fascinated, Lana watched as mother and son battled. Teleporting back. Where was I? Okay. Fascinated, Rayla watched his mother and son battle, the air around, warping around them as they unleashed construct after construct at each other. They fought in a way that Rayla had never considered, teleporting back and forth, not letting the other get a handle on them as they attempted to gain an advantage. Rings of earth slammed into each other when they were on the ground, and blasts of fire and lightning collided in the air. Magma burst erupted from the ground, and energy rains smashed together, even as lethal strikes slammed together. She's significantly better than him at making constructs, Maria remarked, but he's just as strong as her. Abruptly, Lana teleported to an undamaged location, only to have Arthur land in that exact same area. Instinctively, she tried to send an attack against her son, but he moved first. His sword cut through her construct and stabbed her right through the heart. Eyes flicking down to the sword inside her chest, Lana gasped at the blade, blood flowing down her palms. Gasping, Arthur pulled the blade free and threw it aside so he could catch his mother. She clutched at his chest, and Rayla entered her mind. The horror of dying filled her, and the worst part was the silence of both Aran and Issa fading from her mind. The worse than the fear of death was the betrayal she felt. Her son had turned on her for her enemies. Then she faded into oblivion, and Rayla was pushed out of her mind to see Arthur holding his mother weeping. For a moment he just sat there, then he let her down. Without a word, he put out his hand to her head and poured Aran into her. Instantly, she became a statue, her gauntlet becoming her coffin. Swallowing, he picked up the sword he dropped. Then he shook his head. Upon my father's sword, he said quietly, I will never fight with it again. Then he drove the sword into the ground and created a number of words that would kill anybody who touched it. With that, he turned around and departed. The next thing she knew, she saw another vision of Arthur and a group of source users raising what looked to be what the Kresh called the Lion Mountain Range. Then the vision faded to viscous blackness. Wetness stained Rayla's hand and she realized that she was crying. Somehow she found herself kneeling and holding her head in her hands. Why did I see that? She demanded, not knowing if there was anybody to answer. Why? Before an answer could be given, another vision opened to her. And that'll be the end. Dang, that was a lot longer than I anticipated.
Fucking A. Know your role, man. It's my job to torture children, not you.
Yeah.
Monkeys.
Yeah, Balerions become king of the monkeys, man. You're supposed to be Lord of the fucking dragons. What are you doing? What are you doing stepping on my turf here?
Oh, I didn't realize. I beg your pardon. Didn't realize you were in charge of the monkeys.
No, not that. I meant the children suffering.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
It was good, but I'm not gonna lie, I got a fucking headache now.
Yep. It was good, but yeah, it was good at filling us with angst.
Yeah.
It was good at being angsty and dark, grim dark. No monkeys.
Yeah, there were no monkeys here. I can agree with that. But yeah, that was grimdark.
Yeah. yeah, it's very rare that you kind of see something like that to play out. Like I decide, like I'm going to like
Go all out.
yeah, go all out and find the worst think of like the worst possible things that the human body can suffer, and then do that to a person.
Makes sense.
And
Makes
I think
sense.
I succeeded.
Yeah, you did.
At least when I mass kill people, I do it cleanly.
No, at least you don't spend every detail on how everyone will suffer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I probably imagine like that was really long, and I imagine there's probably like you probably don't remember like all of it. But
but the mechanics behind it are fine. Fucking Mary Sue though, bringing down the fucking sun, but you know.
What's
Yeah.
Aron? Sorry.
Aron is basically a it's a kind of it's basically a god who gives people power.
Hey, Zeus, watch this shit.
Yeah. But yeah, I totally like said like, what is the most OP thing I can think of?
Literally calling down the sun.
Yeah, like ripping down a nuclear bomb made from pieces of the sun. And the nice thing is, it's not this is a flashback scene, and this person is technically a villain. So
It works out fine.
Technically a villain. I wouldn't say technically. I would just say flat out villain.
yeah. Yeah, she ended up having to be killed by her own son because she went nuts.
Well, that just shows that the family unit was weak.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Okay, Becca's asking, based on the Welsh god?
Yes, and as well as the bad guy from the Perion Chronicles.
Oh, okay. So this is Aron, Arawn. Okay,
Yep.
I got him now. At least I got him in terms of Welsh mythology.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the name Aron. Just it's cool.
It is cool.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's definitely a Mary Sue. I wanted to use that idea in something, and this was kind of the only thing I could think to use it in, where it's just like it is not a main character. It's a flashback that doesn't have any bearing on that is kind of to show like this character's previous life, I guess.
Right.
Or one of her previous lives. There are 3 previous lives that I do show, and this is one of them.
So there was a connection
Mm-hmm.
between Rayla and Lana?
Yep, that is correct. She just doesn't like Maria. Just kind of sees this as, oh, this is just a neat little science experiment. It's not particularly meaningful because she's a hardcore atheist.
All right, Don, I'm sorry. I got to bounce. Thank you for having me on again.
Alrighty. Well, we'll probably conclude it there. Thank you all. And we'll be back with Fire Cannot Kill a Dragon, The Long Night. And
It would be extremely painful for you.